Theodore Robert Bundy was born in Burlington, Vermont in 1946 and operated across multiple U.S. states including Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. Bundy used charm and deceptive ruses, sometimes pretending to be injured or impersonating an authority figure, to gain the victim's trust before abducting and killing them. He confessed to 30 homicides before his execution in 1989. John Wayne Gacy Jr. was born in Chicago in 1942 and carried out most of his crimes in the Chicago area. Gacy lured teenage boys and young men with promises of work, money, or favors, then assaulted and murdered many of them, and concealed numerous victims beneath or near his home, leading to his conviction for 33 murders and execution in 1994. Jeffrey Dahmer was born in West Allis, Wisconsin in 1960 and operated primarily in Milwaukee. He targeted young men by luring them to his apartment with offers of money or companionship, then drugged and killed them, keeping trophies and photographic records that were discovered when he was arrested in 1991 and later killed in prison. The Green River Killer was born in Salt Lake City, Utah in 1949 and operated around Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. He targeted vulnerable women, often sex workers or runaways, strangled them, and discarded their bodies in wooded or river areas. He later confessed to dozens of murders as part of a plea agreement that spared him the death penalty. Aileen Wuornos was born in Rochester, Michigan in 1956 and committed murders in Florida between 1989 to 1990. She murdered a transient sex worker, she shot several male clients and later claimed self-defense, was convicted of multiple murders, and was executed in 2002. Edward Gein was born in La Crosse County, Wisconsin in 1906 and lived as a reclusive farmer. He exhumed corpses and murdered isolated victims in ways that horrified investigators, was declared legally insane, and spent the remainder of his life in psychiatric care. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was born in El Paso, Texas in 1960 and terrorized the Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay Area between 1984 to 1985. He carried out nighttime home invasions involving burglary, assault, and murder, was captured with civilian help, convicted of multiple counts of murder, and died while on death row. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H. H. Holmes, was born in New Hampshire in 1861 and operated in Chicago around the 1893 World's Fair. He built a boarding house with secret rooms and traps that lured victims. He later was convicted for multiple murders and was executed in 1896. Israel Keyes was born in Utah in 1978 and was notable for traveling across the United States to commit carefully planned killings. He prepared hidden kill kits, selected victims opportunistically while avoiding patterns, but that didn't work out as planned and later confessed to several murders. He died by suicide in custody in 2012. Samuel Little was born in Georgia in 1940 and traveled across many U.S. states over decades. He targeted vulnerable women, often strangling them, and late in life confessed to 93 murders, with investigators confirming over 60, making him the most prolific convicted American serial killer before his death in 2020. Jack the Ripper is the name given to an unidentified killer active in London's Whitechapel district in 1888. The Ripper attacked and murdered several female sex workers in that neighborhood, sent taunting letters to the press, and was never caught, leaving his identity an enduring mystery. Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, was born in West Yorkshire in 1946 and murdered women across northern England between 1975 and 1980. His attacks prompted a huge police manhunt. He later claimed to have been driven by voices, and he was convicted and imprisoned until his death in 2020. Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, known as the Moors murderers. Ian Brady, born in Glasgow in 1938, and Myra Hindley, born in Manchester in 1942, operated together in the Manchester area in the 1960s. The pair abducted and murdered several children on Saddleworth Moor, were convicted and imprisoned, and their case shocked Britain for both its cruelty and the betrayal of community trust. Harold Shipman was born in England in 1946 and practiced medicine in Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. Shipman was a trusted general practitioner. For his murders, he used his medical position to administer lethal doses to elderly patients, falsified the records to make deaths appear natural, and later was linked to over 200 suspected victims. He died by suicide in prison. Fred and Rosemary West. Fred West, born in Herefordshire in 1941, and Rosemary West, born in Merseyside in 1953, lived and operated in Gloucester, England, where as a couple they lured and murdered young women over many years, often bearing victims on their property. Fred died in custody before trial, and Rosemary remains in prison for life. Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Butcher of Rostov, was born in 1936 in what is now Ukraine and operated mainly in the Rostov region of Russia between 1978 and 1990. He targeted women and children. His crimes were able to continue partly due to investigative failures in Soviet policing. He was caught in 1990 and executed in 1994. Joachim Kroll was born in 1933 in what is now Poland and operated in Germany over several decades. He murdered multiple victims and was arrested after human remains were discovered in his apartment, resulting in conviction and imprisonment until his death. Marc Dutroux was born in the Brussels region of Belgium in 1956 and committed child abductions, sexual abuse, and murders in the 1990s. His crimes and the failures surrounding the investigation provoked national outrage and significant reforms in Belgian law enforcement. Luis Garavito was born in Colombia in 1957 and operated there in the 90s. He lured and murdered many poor and vulnerable boys, often using gifts or promises of food or work. He confessed to over 100 murders and was given a long prison sentence under Colombian law. Pedro Alonso Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, was born in Colombia around 1948 and is reported to have killed across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru in the 70s and 80s. He targeted young girls in rural communities, was convicted of many murders in Ecuador, later released, and his later whereabouts became uncertain. Juana Barraza was born in Mexico in the late 1950s and operated in Mexico City in the early 2000s. She targeted elderly women in their homes, commonly strangling them and stealing money, and was arrested, convicted, and given a lengthy prison sentence. Robert Picton was born in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia in 1949 and operated on his pig farm near Vancouver. He targeted sex workers from Vancouver's downtown east side, lured them to his property, and was convicted on multiple counts of murder with suspicions he may have been responsible for many more disappearances. Christopher Wilder was an American serial sexual offender active in the late 70s and early 80s who committed crimes in the United States and abducted at least one victim in Australia during a brief spree. He died during an arrest attempt in 1984. David and Catherine Burney operated together in Western Australia during the 80s. They abducted and murdered women in their home, participated jointly in the crimes. David died in custody while Catherine remains imprisoned. Ivan Milah was born in New South Wales in 1944 and was responsible for the backpacker murders around Belanglo State Forest near Sydney in the late 80s and early 90s. He ambushed travelers, murdered them, and was convicted and sentenced to life without parole until his death in custody. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born in the Tokyo area in 1962 and committed crimes in the Saitama and Tokyo regions in the late 80s. He abducted and murdered young girls, kept disturbing mementos, was tried amid debates over mental illness and media influence. Tsutomu Miyazaki later was executed in 2008. Yang Xinhai was born in China in 1968 and carried out a series of brutal murders across multiple provinces between 2000 and 2003. He often attacked entire households, was arrested in 2003, confessed, and was executed in 2004. Moses Sitole was born in Alexandra, Gauteng, South Africa in 1964 and committed a string of murders in the mid-90s around Johannesburg. He lured women with promises of work, murdered dozens, and was sentenced to more than 2,000 years in prison. Amelia Dyer was born around 1837 in England and operated as a Victorian baby farmer, murdering infants left in her care in the late 19th century and becoming one of Britain's earliest recorded multiple child killers before her execution in 1896. Belle Gunness was born in Norway in 1859 and emigrated to the United States, where she ran a farm and is suspected of killing partners and suitors for financial gain in the early 1900s. Many details of her crimes remain part investigated legend and part historical record. Jane Toppin was born in Massachusetts in 1857 and worked as a nurse in the United States. She used her position of trust to administer lethal doses to patients, confessed to multiple murders, and was committed to a mental institution. Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo operated in Canada in the early 90s. The couple carried out sexual assaults and murders of young women and girls. Their criminal partnership was documented on videotape, and the case remains infamous particularly because of plea deals and controversies over sentencing. Dorothea Puente was born in 1929 in the United States and ran a boarding house in California where she murdered several elderly tenants to steal their money and collect their benefits, was convicted in the 1980s and died in prison.